Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and you're about to listen to an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. This particular episode features myself and Mark Radulich as we discuss Mark's favorite television show of all time, The Wire. Now, Mark's love of The Wire is at this point a very good-natured meme, essentially, here at the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. And this show in particular was a chance to talk about that show. We were counting down to the end of Breaking Bad. The original air date for this episode was September 6th of 2013. So, counting down to the end of Breaking Bad, a massively influential show in its own right. And along the way, doing so, I looked at a bunch of very either character-driven, which is very high-quality, sort of gritty, darker television that sort of paved the way for Breaking Bad to exist. And there was an episode dedicated to The Sopranos, which is myself and Pat Mullen. We re-released that in conjunction with The Many Saints of Newark being released, because synergy. There's one dedicated to The Shield. There's one on Dexter. The Dexter one was re-released a little bit earlier as well. There's several of these, counting down to Breaking Bad's finale. So this one is about The Wire. Mark and I have a good conversation about it because Mark can talk about The Wire forever. I'm a little bit surprised this episode was only as long as it is. But before we get into the podcast proper, let's pay a few bills here. Because we have sponsors, thankfully. First up, let's talk Grammarly. The irony of The Wire partially being sponsored by Grammarly. If you've seen the show, you will understand why that amuses me to a small degree. But for you listeners of Everyone Loves a Bad Guy here on the W2M Network / Radulich and Broadcasting Network, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and anywhere else you write on the web. A lot of those places. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes, while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Contextual errors, man. They get you every time. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M Network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M Network to download Grammarly for free. There's a link in the description below if you would prefer to do that rather than type in the address. Also sponsoring us, Amazon Music. The Wire it wasn't heavy on music in the traditional way that music is used in television and film. In fact, it was one of the hallmarks of the show that it didn't use a whole lot of it. But it would also be incorrect to say that there's no music in the show. If you would like to listen to some of the music that is featured in that particular show, or any other, Amazon Music. It's a library of over 70 million songs, and we're giving you you can have a free 30 days of that particular service on us. If you go to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network, let them know that we're the ones that sent you. Amazon gets helped out, we get helped out, you get 30 days of the best music streaming service on the internet. After that, if you like it, you can keep it. If not, well, you lost nothing, and you got 30 days of amazing streaming music. So, both of those links, once again, getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network. There is also a link in the description below if you would rather click on that. With that out of the way, let me throw this to past me and Mark as we talk about HBO's landmark, groundbreaking television series, arguably the best series in the history of television, irrespective of genre, and I would not argue against you too hard if you made that argument, The Wire. Fellas, take it away.
When the devil is too busy and death a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentleman I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprised. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm the pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wriggle and ride. And it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me. I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am back, you are back, and despite the incessantness and somewhat catchiness of that tune, I'm going to keep using it because I happen to like it and this is my show. Hello, I am Robert Winfree. I am hosting Everyone Loves a Bad Guy, so far on a weekly basis because we're counting down to the epic conclusion of Breaking Bad, which, if the last few episodes are any indication, is going to be all kinds of awesome. And hopefully Skylar gets killed during the process, just because she annoys me. But we're not talking Breaking Bad tonight. That will come later. We're talking about one of HBO's groundbreaking, all-encompassing, epic looks at the city of Baltimore, which, if the show is any indication, needs to be nuked and then folded into New Jersey because they're about as valuable as each other. We're talking The Wire. And I have a guest, a man who loves The Wire more than he loves the Hulk, which, if you know him, is saying quite a lot. He's been here before. He'll be back here again. It's his Blog Talk Radio account. We're a syndicated member of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, so we're not mooching. We're contributing, folks. But Mark Radulich is here, so let's welcome him back. Mark, how you doing?
I'm the fly in your soup. I'm the devil in your poop. I love that song. I sing it while I try to get to work. I sing it while I try to get to work without falling asleep.
Well, it's good for that. So, you threatened me with bodily harm if I did not include you in this particular episode talking about The Wire. So, why don't you give us a little background on your love of that show, how you came to be so enamored with it, and why you would agree to leave your wife if they would bring it back on the air?
The short answer is black people. Is that enough for you, or do you need me to add to that?
That would be enough for me, but we have time to fill, so I'll go a little deeper into that.
What was that, Robert?
That would work for me normally, but since we have a lot of time to fill, I say go a little deeper.
Okay, you need more than just black folks. Got it. So, as we all know from the last time I was on this show, I used to watch a little ditty called Oz on HBO. And I watched Oz because I had this fetish for crime and prison shows, specifically prison-type shows. So I was very fascinated by Oz, as we talked about. And I remember seeing people like Lance Reddick on that show, and it had a majority black cast to it. There weren't, there was a fair amount of white folks on there, but for the most part, it was a all black cast, and there were black people in high positions of power on that. And at the time I lived at home with my parents. I think this had to have been around grad school. So between 2000 and 2005. So yeah, it was grad school and right up until I moved to Florida. So I was living at home with my parents. We had HBO, and I'm flipping through channels one night, and I happened to see Lance Reddick and a few other black actors all on the screen, one of which was, and it turns out this was the chief of police at the time, whose name I don't recall, his real name. I'm sure as we get into it, I'll remember what his name is. But I remember I focused on that for a moment. I said, there's a bunch of halfway famous black actors all on screen here, and I looked and it was HBO. And I was like, I wonder what they're doing and why are they dressed like police? I'm gonna sit and watch this. This is about 2 or 3 episodes.
Cops?
What's going on here? And I was fascinated because anytime I'm watching TV and I see a majority black cast, especially in positions of power, I'm intrigued. I want to know where they're going with this sort of thing. So I stopped and I watched, and it turns out it was The Wire. and I got through the entire episode. I didn't understand a thing they were fucking talking about. Not a lick, okay? They might as well have been speaking Mandarin Chinese. I had no clue what was going on. But that spoke to the power of the show, because despite that, I was intrigued by what I was watching. And I learned what it was, and I was like, okay, I'm going to keep tuning into this. And then when the show finally ended, I was hooked. By the time they get to the end where they bust Avon and his entire crew, save for Stringer Bell, I was sold on this series, and I made sure this was one of the few times I went out and bought the box set when it came out, so I can go back and watch the earlier episode. And from then on, I've been a huge fan of The Wire. Yes, I am one of those obnoxious TV nerds, snobs that
That's one word.
talks endlessly about The Wire and how great it is. And I make mention of that because there's a great Screen Junkies honest trailer for Breaking Bad, which is one of the reasons why I started watching Breaking Bad in the first place, was I saw the honest trailer for it and I thought it was hilarious. And I wanted to know what it was talking about. But it was just like, finally, a series that made TV snobs shut up about The Wire. Yeah, I'm one of those people. So, well, aside from the fact that it's got black people in it, why do you like it so much, Mark? Well, here's why. After 5 seasons of The Wire, the reason why I love it is it's got all the things in it that I enjoy in my television viewing. There was drama. There was gritty, realistic street drama. It was about urban decay and the war on drugs. A little bit about me here. A lot of my graduate work was on substance abuse treatment, substance legalization, treatment versus incarceration. I did a lot of work about this, a lot of research. It was the majority of what my papers were on. So this has always been a topic of interest for me. So when I saw a show that was really dedicated to what is the war on drugs, what does it look like, and you kind of use the city of Baltimore as a microcosm for the war on drugs, and you got to look at what does a police investigation into a drug family look like from the cop side and from the drug lord side. That's me in a nutshell. That's the kind of stuff I like to watch. It helped that the actors in the show are absolutely phenomenal. You know, there was when season 5
Well, that's what
was
happens
coming
when
out,
you let character actors play characters, and you don't have to pay them too much because they're not
There
big
was
names.
a television critic who was giving an interview about The Wire prior to season 5 starting, and he said that The Wire is as realistic a show as you're going to see on TV, and it still draws back a little bit from being too realistic. And he said, if The Wire ever showed what the kinds of things they talk about on that show as they truly are, it would be too much for any one viewer. It would be a well of infinite sadness. And that's true. But that's what I love about The Wire, is that at least it even comes close to that. Now, last thing, and then I'll relinquish the microphone. People have been asking me as of late, because the subject had come up, why do you think The Wire is better than Breaking Bad or The Shield or whatever? I can't compare it to The Sopranos because I've never watched it. Something about my grandmother not thinking there's really a mafia and me wanting to honor that. I just won't watch The Sopranos. But I will watch Casino, oddly enough. One of my favorite movies.
One's a movie, one's a television show, one's a bunch of Joe Pesci. No, wait, that's Goodfellas. It's Joe Pesci in Casino, too.
Yes, he is. He gets hit in the head with a bat in the cornfield, but that's not what's important right now.
Joe Pesci getting hit in the head with a bat's always important.
The Shield and Breaking Bad, and even just from the show you did with Pat, which was very well done, by the way, on The Sopranos.
Apart from the Blog Talk Radio issues dropping me every 5 minutes.
The Blog Talk thought Pat was just fine on his own, thank you very much.
Well, he kind of is. Oh, since, brief aside, in the near future, for everyone listening who has not heard this before, the Radulich and Broadcasting Network will be switching from being here on Blog Talk Radio to a Google Hangout format. After the episodes are recorded, Mark's lovely and talented wife will be uploading them. We'll be changing them, uploading them to YouTube, and you can find them there if you can't listen live. If you're going to find them on YouTube, please turn off ad blocker, because we don't get paid for this. We do it because we love it. So if we can make a small bit of income after the fact, then, hey, we're all very happy for that. If any of us were rich and we were doing this just because we love it, I'd say I don't care. because, hey, if we're rich, we don't need the extra money from this, but we're not. We're all working stiff, so when that happens, please, if you're watching us or listening on YouTube, turn off ad block. We'd all appreciate it.
So, Breaking Bad, The Shield, The Sopranos, many of these shows are essentially about one man's descent into hell. And while The Wire, at least in 4 out of the 5 seasons, because season 4 was definitely not the McNulty season, rested comfortably on McNulty's shoulders, who we're going to talk about shortly, The Wire was about much more than one man's descent into hell. The Wire was about society's descent into hell. The Wire was about the utter bleakness and hopelessness inherent in
human condition,
in corrections, in law enforcement, in the war on drugs, in urban life, the plight of the black man. And I'm dead serious when I say the plight of the black man. I'm not trying to be. When you think about where black people are in society, and I'm not going to shy away from that, sorry. I know the 2 white guys talking about the plight of the black man, how liberal. I don't care. It was a part of the show. It was an integral part of the show, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. But that show dealt with where are black people in urban society? Where are black people in the socioeconomic schema of the United States? When you think about the population of incarcerated people, when you think about who is mostly affected by the Rockefeller drug laws in New York, by the state and federal drug laws, by the whole history of this country, you have to think about, well, how has that affected black people and black culture in the United States? And The Wire dealt with all of that. So why is The Wire better than all of the other shows that I just mentioned? Because it's an opera. It is a wide, expansive look at all of these very complex issues going on right now in this country, as seen through the eyes of a handful of characters. But ultimately, the show was more than just about the characters, whereas shows like The Wire and Breaking Bad are only about the characters. There's no message in Breaking Bad. This is Walt's descent into hell. There was no message in The Shield. That was Vic Mackey's descent into hell. There are more messages coming at you in The Wire than anything you're going to read in the newspaper. And for me,
you made a season 4 reference. Or was it 5?
For me,
that dealt with the newspapers.
That's why the show is head and shoulders above everything else. And and the last thing I'm going to say on this is I resisted watching Breaking Bad for a long time, even though everybody and their mother thought it was the world's greatest thing. And I remember my wife, as I call her, my good friend Sarah, who was actually my wife's best friend, said to me, she was like, my husband John, is her real husband, not me, who she calls husband. We're weird like that. She said, if you love The Wire, you'll at least like Breaking Bad. And Dustin James of 411 said the same thing to me. He's like, if you love The Wire, you'll love Breaking Bad. And to them I say, either you never actually watch The Wire or you don't understand it. But either way, yes, they're both great shows, and ultimately it was a good recommendation, but you're comparing, apples to lobster when you compare both of them and say, well, if you like this one, you'll like that one.
Yeah, I don't generally approve of if-then statements when it comes to what things you'll like. So when someone comes to me for an opinion on shows or I'm giving one, if I'm drawing comparisons, like if I were to say, here are some correlations between The Wire and Breaking Bad, or between The Wire and The Shield, or Oz and if at any point I'm trying to draw connections, I tend to avoid, well, if you liked this, then you'll like this, because that's not always the case. And I know people who, 2 shows like, I have a friend who's a big fan of Oz but can't stand The Wire. I don't necessarily agree with that, but again, this is personal opinion we're talking about. So you have to be careful with recommendations like that are predicated on if-then statements. But I'm very glad you got into Breaking Bad, though. For me, that show doesn't really hit 4th or 5th gear until you get Gus Fring in it. But we'll save that for a couple of weeks from now when we get to that one. So you mentioned that kind of the main character, if there is one, guy who we tend to see the most throughout the season of The Wire, is Jimmy McNulty. And he's played by, I have the list here, Dominic West. You'll notice with 90% of all of these actors that we're talking about that they're character actors. They do very little big-name work. You might recognize a face here or there, but they're not necessarily leading stars. And that's one of the reasons this show works so well, is you don't have a bunch of guys competing for the spotlight in terms of, who's, just the acting and the writing. You have a bunch of character actors who, as a normal rule, are used to playing supporting roles. So when they're all supporting each other, the whole product kind of becomes elevated. But Jimmy McNulty is this really kind of egotistical, self-involved, self-destructive, self-righteous asshole. And he's constantly of the opinion that the ends justify the means. If I have to maybe shovel a little dirt here, if I can bring down Avon Barksdale, if I can bring down Stringer Bell because he escaped me, if I can do, a couple of these things, then everything else will be worth it, and my life will continue to have some sort of meaning. I mean, there's a sequence in the second or third season where a couple of the detectives are talking with the man McNulty pissed off, probably more than anyone, his former major, Bill Rawls. And they're requesting that he be transferred off of the Marine detail, and they say, look, he's a self-destructive, monumental, pain-in-the-ass screw-up, unless he's working a case, in which case he's pretty much the same. Unless he's working a case where he actually gets to think and do some police work, and then he's actually a half-decent cop. But, as it stands, he's not doing anybody any good, so let him do some investigative work, and maybe everybody can benefit, and he gets to do some investigative work, but it just feeds his own downward spiral because he then becomes obsessed. He's kind of like, a little bit in that sense, like McManus from Oz, in that when he's got something to do, he just tries so darn hard and invests so much into it that when it inevitably falls short of his unrealistic expectations, he has to go get drunk and then drive his car twice into a cement pillar.
I actually want to draw your attention to an even more revealing scene about McNulty's character, and it's when he's having dinner with the political consultant, and he's talking about how he got his wife pregnant early on, and he had to drop out of college. I think it was like Malloy College, so it was somewhere in Baltimore. But he was in college, and he had to drop out, and he became a cop to take care of his newly pregnant wife. So he never realized his full potential. And what becomes apparent in that scene is that the detective work and the need to bring down Avon and all of the things that have been covered in the previous, I think it's 2 seasons by that point, because I want to say this was season 3, is that...
It's 3 or 4, because that's when you meet her. You meet Miss D'Agostino. She's the campaign manager for Tom Conchetti as he runs against the mayor of Baltimore. But 3 or 4, right. I can't remember which.
But you realize that it's all self-serving. It's all a need for him to be validated, and he says something to that effect in that scene. But that realistically, this while I'm sure there's some elements to it that doing the greater good for the community and bringing down drug lords, it's really more about Jimmy McNulty. And isn't Jimmy McNulty the smartest stripper in the room?
Yeah, he's. I think it's either him or Lester Freeman who we'll kind of dovetail this into because they're similar in some way, especially by the end of the series, that says, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and we've been perpetually putting him in the room with all of these dumb motherfuckers, so he's used to thinking he's the smartest man in the room, and we've done nothing to dissuade him of that illusion. But McNulty's a guy who he obsesses over... at the end of the first season, when Avon Barksdale, the target of the entire investigation in the first season, is finally brought in. It's not on any of the big charges that he wanted him to be brought in on. He can't arrest Stringer Bell, Avon's second in command, because he doesn't have the evidence on him. And they're able to get all of these drug dealers and Avon, who runs this entire subsection of Baltimore as far as the drug trade goes. And he's sitting in the courtroom at the end of all this, and he looks at it and he kind of goes, well, what good did that do?
Fuck, what have I done?
Which is his constant refrain. What the fuck have I done?
Well, in this case, it was that moment of realization that he sort of blew up this case with very little to show for it. So it was, fuck, what have I done? Later on, it'll become, what have I done? As if he has amnesia and remembers
how is this
nothing.
My fault?
Yeah. How? Why are you all looking at me for? Why is everybody always picking on me? Yes, Jimmy McNulty evolves into Charlie Brown. He's a clown.
Well, yeah, in the second season, when he gets off of the Marine detail and he walks in to the investigative unit, and prior to his entering, they're discussing trying to get someone into this prostitution ring to, get information on the madam and this smuggling ring that's being brought in through the ports, and all of the men naturally are volunteering because, hey, guess what I get to go do? And for one reason or another, they're all shot down, legitimate reasons, and then McNulty walks in and everyone just kind of looks at him, and then I think it's Kima Greggs who says, well, you need a whore to catch a whore, and everyone starts laughing, and McNulty having no idea what they were talking about, looks at them, what the fuck did I do?
Right.
No, you're a man whore,
yeah, but
you just happened to enter at the opportune time.
But that's the tragedy of Jimmy McNulty, is that he seeks validation in a career field where you are often not rewarded for doing the best job possible. And that is made abundantly clear throughout the series. I mean, and this goes back to my initial statement that David Simon wrote The Wire as much an editorial on the state of police work as in anything else. And one of the things that he was criticizing was that, people doing good, honest detective work, people that are really trying hard to make things better for the rest of society are often not rewarded for what they do. The people who play the game are... I have to tell this story really quick. The sheriff's office that I work for, and I will not say which county it is, there was a conversation about a particular deputy who is absolutely awful, just a despicable human being. And everyone, including some other deputies, just think she's, as a human being, just the worst. But she happens to be an African American female, and if a position as sergeant ever opens up, and she's already passed the sergeant's exam, it was told she'll most likely get it because she's an African American female, and there's a desire to promote from the minority ranks, especially given the population of the county we all work in. Never mind the fact that she's a detestable human being, and she wasn't a particularly good deputy. And
well, hey, if she were a lesbian, she'd fit. If she were a lesbian, she'd fit 3 of the minority criteria, and then it'd be a sure thing. They'd fire somebody to move her up.
Again, given the county, that might make her more of an outcast. But if this is San Francisco, fine. That's fine. No qualms about it. Then she could be a lesbian transsexual, and nobody would care. But not here in the Sunshine State of Florida. What was that?
You need to be at least black, gay, transgender, or some other issue like that to even get into politics in San Francisco. If you're just a straight white guy and you're trying to run for office in San Francisco, it's never going to happen, folks.
Unless your last name is Pelosi. But the point that I'm trying to drive home with that story is that McNulty sort of feels the pangs and the slings and arrows of a profession that isn't rewarding him for his self-perceived genius. So when we meet McNulty, it's he's on the downside of his career, and he's sort of struggling with the how do I phrase this? He's struggling with the frustration of it all. The hopelessness. He's struggling with the hopelessness of it all, and he's decided that this Avon Barksdale case is the line in the sand. He must bring down Avon because what else is there to do? Continue to just figure out which hump shot which hump on what street? This is getting us nowhere, and so he seeks to do the greater good, and in doing so upsets a lot of apple carts, and in the end he's punished. And that is the tragedy of Jimmy McNulty. The other side no, go ahead. I was going to say the other side of that is, and this is a line that Lester Freeman says later on, is that along the way he burns every relationship he has. He is a terrible husband because in all of this he's also self-destructive. Some people like to cut. He likes to go drink and sleep with loose women, and he destroys his marriage because of it. The whole obsession with Avon Barksdale leads with him being demoted to from detective to the Marine unit, where he's basically just fishing bodies out of water. Over the course of 5 seasons, he'll as Lester Freeman says, he'll burn everything he touches, and in the end, he won't have police work to fall back on anymore. He will be booted from the force with nary even a pension. So,
Which
that's
is exactly
him.
what happened.
Yes, he is self-destructive and obsessive to a fault. And that's why he fits in well with the theme of good men gone bad, because he is a good person. He means well, but he can't get out of his own way.
He's one of those people who you think if he had just enough self-preservation instinct to play the political game even a little, he could have accomplished so much more good than he ever would just being, an asshole.
But at what cost, Robert Winfree? At what cost? How much is a man's soul worth? That is the question we must ask when we come to Jimmy McNulty. If he
this
could
is a
give
man
up
who
any
urinated in front of he urinated in front of an oncoming train. We're really going to debate the worth of his soul here?
Well, he was drunk, and your worth of your soul is only equated to how sober you really are at the time.
And it's not very high for him then, because he spends a fair amount of the series drunk.
It's Baltimore, yo.
I just imagine that whole.
Sorry, I love that line.
With that
I
whole
had
city burned to the
my
ground.
wife who was whiter than white. She is whiter than Casper the Ghost. I have her. Occasionally, she'll just look over at me and say, "Can be more. We aim to hit a nigga. You heard?" Like.
Oh, bunch of thieves. What's the line from the second season when Nick Sabatka is looking at the horrifyingly white, forgive the phrase, wigger on the street corner
Wigger.
trying to...
Wait a minute. You didn't have wiggers in your school? I mean, that was that was like the Breakfast Club 2000. You had the wiggers, and you had the jocks, and you had the goths.
I'm fairly sure there were. I just didn't pay enough attention. Plus, again, I went to school out here in Utah, so not only was it predominantly white, predominantly, more than 50%, but the people of color that I knew, again, forgive the phrasing necessarily, I mean, it's one of those things where, what's the politically correct term changes by the minute, but the black people that I knew were not, they didn't behave as, rappers or people from the inner city because of the geographical location I was in. I just was never personally really exposed to people who use that vocabulary, that particular slang, all of that, just because of where I was. I experienced it later, of course, when I moved around a lot. But so when I saw them, when I saw people trying to be black like that, it was almost a parody of Wiggers because there was so little actual understanding of what it was to kind of impersonate a black person.
For the first 12 years of my life, literally from birth to 12, I lived in a predominantly black community. And I picked up, and while this was the suburbs, it was the suburbs of New York City where, let's just talk about white flight. So World War II ends, and with the GI Bill and the stipends that a lot of the soldiers got, they left Little Italy and the Irish towns of New York, and they moved into Western Long Island, and we bought houses. Levittown, the Levitt House, right? One of the earliest planned suburban communities. So you had a bunch of white people living, settling essentially Western Long Island, and then as black people started to make money, now that the white people had left Manhattan and Brooklyn and Queens. You had black people filling in, and they started to make money, and they want a better life for their children, so they all move into Western Long Island, right alongside the white people, who then pick up stakes and move further east. So just kept on going, and eventually there was nowhere left to go because Montauk's too expensive and too far out. But I grew up in an area where white flight had left nothing but a suburban landscape populated by black people, by middle-class black folk. And it just so happens that my grandmother sold real estate in that neighborhood, so that's where my parents bought their first house because that's what they could afford. I picked up the urban street slang of the black people around me, who, of course, picked it up from people from the city. And I remember when my mother got sick and tired of me sounding like a black kid, she moved my white ass to eastern Long Island, further east Long Island, into Massapequa, home of Jerry Seinfeld, Dee Snider, and Stuttering John of Howard Stern fame. And I walk into school, junior high, and I'm just surrounded by white kids, not a black kid in sight. It was a very new experience for me. And they listened to me talk, and they were like, do you think you're black or something? And I'm like, no, it's just where I'm from, yo, bitch. No, I wasn't that kid from Breaking Bad. But but a few years now, I finally, after a few years of this, learned to talk like a white kid again. You know, my speech has been rehabilitated. And no sooner than I start talking like all the stupid white kids around me, now the white kids are talking like black kids. And I mean all of them, okay? That's why the whole thing about wiggers, that my whole school went white wigger at one point. They were wearing baggy pants and pot leaf shirts, and I'm just like, fuck every last one of you. I was like this before it was cool. And
so you were the hipster.
I really was. I brought the culture. Now that I've hijacked your podcast to talk about my autobiography, please continue.
Well, hey, I'm sure it'll sell dozens of copies across the country when you finally publish it. But as you mentioned, this series deals with every level of kind of the infrastructure of the city of Baltimore. It's not focused very much on a whole lot of people, and you get it covers so much ground and touches on so many issues. I mean, the first season you deal specifically with the police work and the drug trade. The second season branches out into dealing with
it's the loss of the American dream. The second episode is what happens to middle class to working class America when working class is replaced by foreign economies and robots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the third season, you start getting into the school system, and then there's the politics.
No.
School is
you missed
4,
one.
Politics is 3rd.
Season 3 is the war on drugs, specifically, and should we or should we not legalize? That's what Season 3 tackles. It also starts to tackle the political schema of stateside politics. It's Season 4 that you get into the education.
Yeah, and then 5 when you branch out a little further and you start including the joys of consumer economy and specifically mass, media consumption and all of the fun stuff that goes along with that, because there's a fair amount of it. But again, we deal with a lot of people, and a lot of them tend to kind of like McNulty in that they're real. There's very few black and white as far as this goes. You have good people and bad people, but they're all fully kind of fleshed out characters. None of them are strictly evil. There are a few, but not too many of them, and kind of a reverse side to McNulty, probably the most famous character to come out of The Wire, the Scarface bandit, Omar Little. And he's
my favorite character in all of television.
Yes, you and President Obama. That he's gone on record in saying that Omar Little is his favorite character from The Wire, which is his favorite television show, et cetera, et cetera. So go ahead and talk a little bit about Omar Little, the first homosexual drug bandit in television history.
Omar is a great, colorful character. You're right in that he's sort of the polar opposite of McNulty. What can you say about Omar? Omar drips cool, first of all. I said this about O'Reilly on the Oz podcast, where he's such a low life, despicable sociopath, but he's just so dang cool. Well, that was Omar, but he brought it to a whole other level. Omar's character is, as you said, a homosexual street urchin who robs drug dealers. And he would initially have nothing to do with the police except for the fact that because of his profession as a mugger of drug dealers, he gains the ire of the Avon Barksdale drug family, and they decide that they're going to make an example out of him. And to do that, they kidnap and torture and eventually murder Omar's lover, who is beautiful, as he's. And because of that, Omar is a throwback. He's sort of the last of the red-hot, old-school street thugs. And he lives by a code. And it's funny because I've often heard it was said in Oz and it was said in other places where it was like, so-and-so lived by a code that nobody pays attention to anymore. You hear a lot of guys who play mafia characters talk about stuff like that. The code is dead. If you live by the code, you'll end up dying by it now. And he's a throwback to that era and on that sort of code of thieves. And he looks at Avon as being somebody who has upended that code. and that he's, and what little culture, what little honor there was among thieves in the streets of Baltimore, he feels that Avon Barksdale is somewhat of a threat. And at the end of the day, it was just about revenge. Avon got his lover, so he wants to help. So he wants to bring down Avon, and he sees McNulty and the Baltimore Police Department as an end to that means. So he becomes a witness in the Gantt trial, which is essentially one of Avon's guys who is, I think, Sticky Fingers, or Sticky Fingers from
I think. Bird.
Onyx, shoots a witness, and he goes to trial for shooting that witness, and Omar is going to testify that he was the one, in fact, who shot him. And he's doing this just to get back at Avon. No other reason. But
he's lying through his
throughout the series, we see him becoming a continual thorn in the side of Avon, and you see Avon and Stringer Bell try to get him. And it's kind of like Schillinger and Beecher. They just keep doing stuff to each other, and nobody is better off, for it in the end. And he also has one of the most anticlimactic deaths in television history. But it was in its anticlimacticness, it was poignant. If The Wire is a picture into what it's like to live in these streets, something that my wife and I were actually talking about tonight. Tonight on the news here in Tampa, there was a series of home invasions near the University of South Florida, where this guy from the neighboring county came in and tied up and robbed and sexually assaulted a number of people living in a series of apartments around the school campus. And we were talking about the one thing I truly fear and have sort of willed myself to always be prepared for is in case there's ever a fucking home invasion, and what I'm going to do to protect my family. Where's I going with that? I was connecting that to Omar, and I don't remember what my connection was.
Omar's death is just he even sees the small kid that shoots him in the back of the head.
Robert, bail me out
cigarette. Here. Omar sees
Tommy,
that.
can you hear me?
Did I get cut off? You know what? I bet I did. Dang it. Hang
Robert
on,
has gone into radio silence for some odd reason. I know Blog Talk Radio is still having issues tonight with sound dropping out, which if you hear this on playback, you won't hear people dropping out, I think, but we can't hear each other at times. So I'm going to try to get myself back on track here with Omar. Oh, I was talking about okay, so anything can happen, right? And that's where I was drawing the comparisons with my, living in fear of a home invasion. Whereas, these people living on campus at USF, never thought that for a minute somebody would kick open their door, tie them up, and assault their women.
Hey, can you hear me? Mark, am I back?
Now I can. Now, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
My audio got dropped courtesy of Blog Talk.
Yeah, that's been happening all night.
What
I was about to say is,
I tried to bail you out by saying that, Omar even sees this little, 8-9-year-old kid in the convenience store with him.
Right.
Looks over and sees him and then just ignores him, and that little kid pulls out a gun and shoots him in the back of the head.
Yes, that's where I was going with. Thank you. 20 minutes later, we finally get there. But as an audience member, you don't see that coming. Certainly, the characters don't see that coming. And the character that shoots him had no motivation for doing so other than he was there at the time. The kid was looking for somebody to shoot, and there was Omar, not paying any attention. So that's why I said it was a tale of the street. It was poignant in that it tells you that really anything can happen, but it was also anticlimactic because this guy had managed to escape the ire of not one but two different drug lords who were out to kill him, and he got him every single time.
Yeah, it seemed like you could never actually get to Omar. I mean, you'd send people after him. He killed Stringer Bell. He hijacked an entire enormous container full of heroin from Stanfield. It's just there's no way anybody's ever actually going to get this guy, and if they do, it's going to be a hail of gunfire and a lot of people dead on both sides, and instead it's this little kid who earlier, I can't remember if it was that season or a couple of seasons beforehand, but who earlier was debating with a bunch of his friends about who got to play Omar in their their game that they were playing, and he just shot Omar in the head. Wait, that's a little kid. And to kind of compensate for the incongruity of it, all of the drug dealers on the street and everything, begin concocting these elaborate stories about how many people and what it took to take down Omar and how he went down firing an AK-47 in a blaze of glory. But no, he was just shot in the head by a 9-year-old kid.
My favorite Omar bit, and there's a bunch. Actually, I have two favorite Omar scenes in all of The Wire, and they are very different from each other. And the first one is he's with his new boyfriend, and he goes to get Honey Nut Cheerios. And he walks out of his... Huh?
That's a non-running gag there. He loves Honey Nut Cheerios, but it seems like he can never find them. He has a hard time finding them.
Yeah, they never get the Honey Nut Cheerios when he goes to buy them. In any case, he walks out of his home, such as it is, and he's got on his silk pajamas, and he walks down the street, and as he's walking down the street, people yell, "It's Omar, yo!" And they just throw drugs at him and run. And so he comes back to the house. He's got a bag full of drugs that he just throws on the table with utter disdain. And he looks over, and the kid looks at him, and he goes, "They were out of Cheerios?" And he goes, "I don't even want this." It was it was one of those ultimate, like, I have conquered the world, and yet I am unhappy. It was an Alexander the Great moment. He just laid on his rock and sobbed that there was no more world left to conquer. And I think that's when he gets the idea for one last big score. Because what has happened is he's now become so infamous. He's become so legendary in the streets of Baltimore that there's no challenge in it anymore. There's no, it was funny. I just got finished watching the first half of season 4 of Oz, and Adebisi says much the same thing to Saeed. He says, "I've gotten everything I've wanted, and it's not enough. I'm still trapped here in Oz." And here you have Omar, very similar. I've done all of these terrible things, and now people are so afraid of me. There's no challenge in this for me. There's nothing to it. I need more. There has to be, as Jack Nicholson once said, is this as good as it gets? And that's where he gets the idea to do one big score and then retire, and that's how he ends up hijacking, a Titanic shipment of heroin that he sells back to Pop Joe.
Which he then sells back to Proposition.
Yeah, for like billions of dollars. And he does retire after that. He is out of the game for a while until they drag him back in.
Until Marlowe, Stanfield's crew, torture and kill his mentor Butchie, and at that point, he's like, okay, now I'm going to come after you guys, and even after he falls out of a window and breaks his leg, he's still hobbling around with a made-up crutch from a broom, and people still are terrified. Anytime he goes up to somebody, they're like, oh, crap, it's Omar, and they will throw the drugs at him and run away because that's what he's after.
Yeah, his legend became bigger than the man.
Although, I got to say, anybody who would show up to court wearing what he was wearing and then proceed to own the scumbag lawyer with, well, I've got the shotgun and you've got the briefcase.
That's a lot of people's favorite scene with, but that leads me to my other favorite scene of his. So like I said, there's two. There's that whole bit where he just looks at the table and says, I don't even want this anymore. But the other one, and I told this story in sort of jest on a Casual Heroes podcast because we were supposed to be talking about wrestling and to essentially harass Chris Evans, who is the host. Myself and Jed just start talking about The Wire incessantly. But it's the scene where Bunk confronts, we haven't talked about Bunk yet, but Bunk is McNulty's longtime homicide partner and Snappy Dresser. And he goes to confront...
Man was born in pinstripes.
Yes, he was. What do you call a man who's pays too much attention to his wardrobe? An adult. So Bunk goes to confront Omar because Omar has essentially terrorized a potential witness into hushing. So that completely screws up Bunk's case. So he goes to confront Omar about it, and Omar is basically like, no one's going to talk to you. He's essentially what little rapport they had, what little peace they had between them has now dissolved, and they've gone back to being antagonists. And Omar's basically like, look, you can question as many people as you want. No one will talk to you because I say so. And Bunk launches into a tirade at Omar, and the sum total of it is what I sent you on Twitter. He said, we used to have a community. Now all we have is bodies, and it's because of predatory motherfuckers like you. And
well, those two actually had a history. I mean, they went to high school together, more or less.
Yeah, they went to they went to the same school.
So they came up in the same community and everything, and Bunk has been trying to better the world with his pinstripe suits and his old lacrosse sweatshirts that he wears on occasion when he doesn't feel like dressing up. And Omar has decided to maintain the parasitic struggle that exists within that urban lifestyle.
But what I wanted to draw attention to was the acting. The Michael something or other.
Williams, I think.
Michael K. Williams, yeah. Michael K. Williams is an extraordinary actor, and that scene should be, if whatever part he ever reads for, he should just send them that clip. Because there is more acting going on as he just sits there on the bench, and I'm going to use the phrase well of infinite sadness again, but that's what it is. He just, without changing his facial expression, it's all in his eyes, and of course the drool, you see this enormous well of guilt rising up in him. He doesn't move, he doesn't say anything, he doesn't change. It's all in his eyes, and it's extraordinarily powerful. And you see that he knows Bunk is right, and he doesn't know what to do with that. The only person in the entire series to ever shake him at his core and really get to him, do him damage that he has no answer for. Because everybody else shoots at him, kills someone he loves, whatever, and he seeks revenge, and he gets revenge to a measure one way or another. This is the only time in 5 seasons of The Wire where somebody pierces him to the core and he has no response. And it's one of my favorite Omar scenes in 5 series because of that. Because of the acting, but also because of the realization that, and you don't get this much. You don't really get this in real life. When you confront sociopaths, they tend not to reflect back on what they've done and go, you know what, you're right, I'm terrible. What you get is a lot of excuse making and blame. For once, you saw somebody cut a sociopath to the quick, and the sociopath go, you're right, I'm terrible. And for me, it's powerful. It's also completely fictional, but it was a powerful moment. Powerful television, a powerful, dramatic television in a series of hell.
Well, Omar's level of sociopathy is a fair deal less than Stringer Bell's, for example, who doesn't seem to care too much what he does or who he hurts to do it.
Yeah, Stringer Bell's actually closer to McNulty than Omar is in terms of character structure.
Well, and that and Stringer Bell seems to have this sincere desire to stop being a drug lord and go into legitimate business. And personally,
he's another one who's driven by self-validation. They talk about him too. As a youngster, he wanted to be a business owner, and he wanted to be better than the community he grew up in. And in order to get to that place, he had to make some very, very bad decisions. And now he's trying to maneuver his way out of it. And what he comes to realize up until his untimely death is that the choices he has made has dug himself a hole too deep, and there's no getting out of it. He will forever be associated with drugs and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, his death sequence is rather powerful in that he tries to negotiate with both Omar Little and Brother Mozone. I can never pronounce his name right.
Brother Mozone.
The member of the the Islamic Brotherhood, comes down from New York to do some dirty work for Avon and winds up getting shot by Omar before he and Omar realize that they were both done wrong by Stringer, so they get revenge on him. He tries to negotiate first, and then as soon as he realizes that, no, I can't get out of this, the hole that I've dug is too deep, it's just, well, then get on with it and finish it.
That's how I'm going out, Robert Winfree. I have 2 people pointing guns at me. I'm just going to be able to get on with it, motherfuckers.
Yeah, but Omar is interesting in that he's not, necessarily a huge sociopath like some others are. If you want to, I think the most sociopathic person in that whole series is introduced later, and that's Marlo Stanfield, who just doesn't seem to care about anything.
Oh no, that whole crew is ridiculous. Avon's crew, it was about drugs and territory and expanding the business and money. Right. They were your traditional drug lords. This group, drugs were almost a secondary desire, secondary motivation. They seem to be completely driven by murdering people. They were almost like a group of. That's why season 5 is so funny because, McNulty even says it. He was just like, your serial killer is Marlowe, for Christ's sake. Do you know how many people he's murdered and shoved into row houses? Why does it have to be this sexy story, with a twist. It is what it is. He's murdering people at a rate faster than any serial killer.
Yep.
I mean, when you think about the kinds of murders that are portrayed in seasons 4 and 5, you've got Bodhi's fat friend, who doesn't say anything to anybody, doesn't give anybody up, and yet is still murdered. I mean, they just run through Baltimore, murdering everybody that Marlowe says go kill, and they do it without even an ounce of regret. The one that shows any kind of thought about it, any kind of conscience, is Michael, who turns into Omar by the end of season 5.
Yeah, he goes from... Well, he's the one we're introduced to in season 4 when they get into the school system because he's a student of poor Agent Presbalewski. If anyone was never meant to be a police officer, that poor guy. Great mind for detail, great mind for patterns. Give that man a firearm and the whole thing just kind of goes to hell.
Well, you always got the feeling with Presbalewski that he was being punished for the sins of his family. I mean, he marries Major Polish face, his daughter.
Volchek, I think.
Yeah, Major Volchek. And you always got the feeling that he didn't really ever want to be a cop. And that it is only the Avon Barksdale detail in season 1 that he even becomes remotely interested in what he's doing for the first time. And from there, he says, there's something here that I can tend to. But prior to that, you got the impression that this was not what he wanted to be when he grew up.
No, he seems happier, like, teaching people, when he's teaching inner-city youths math projects and everything and trying to reach a couple of them.
Yeah, Presbalewski became a much more interesting character in season 4 when he becomes a middle school. He's much more human. I mean, certainly when he's starting off shooting up abandoned cars in season 1 and nearly blinding a kid with his gun, it's a long way through that first 3 seasons.
And then he follows that up with shooting a police officer to be forced to retire.
Yes, and for my next magical trick, yeah, he's a much more interesting character in season 4 and 5, as he's trying to... I mean, clearly he's not from the culture that he's teaching, and yet he's, trying again to reach these kids because it's important to him. And he's much more internally motivated to try to reach these children than anything he was doing, even when he was excited by the work. So I like Presbalewski in 5, not so much in seasons 1 through 3. So the sequence where he's putting together the bulletin board to Johnny Cash's "Walk the Line" is one of my favorites of the entire series.
Yeah, and he's so sad when he has to take down the board at the end of the first season. He's like, wait, I was actually doing something useful, and now I get to go back to being a nobody.
I worked so hard on this.
And, speaking of people who are perpetually the butt of everyone's joke, we should probably talk a little bit about poor Ziggy and his duck that he killed with alcohol. But Ziggy got on my nerves the very moment he stepped on screen and didn't really become a little bit sympathetic for me until he stopped trying to be something he wasn't, and he got that pet duck that he liked and then killed because he took it to the bar with the other Steve drawers from the docks, and they gave it alcohol, and you can't give a small duck a bunch of alcohol and expect it not to die of alcohol poisoning in the very near future.
Well, Ziggy's character was he lived in the great big shadow of his father, who was a god among men on the docks, and he never could quite escape that. And he's another self-destructive character, where he's given opportunities to better himself, and he just chooses not to. It's like he's come to the conclusion somewhere along the line that he isn't worth anything. He'll never be as good as his father, so he doesn't even try. And he seeks validation through being, sort of a clown among the other guys, and as long as he can make them laugh, at least he's found his usefulness. But I'm always fascinated when I rewatch season 2 of the conversation he has with his dad when he's talking about what he remembers, and he remembers something falling on a longshoreman, and he remembers protests, and just these different stories that he's rattling off, sort of an admission that this is his life. It's not the life he would have chosen for himself, but it's the life that he got, and he accepts the consequences of that life. being in the shadow of his father and all. And I don't think his father really knew what to make of that scene or what to make of him. I think he had so much going on with him in season 2 that I don't think he ever quite understood Ziggy. It was a typical father-son relationship. Why, I've given you every opportunity to be better than me, and the son just throwing it back at him and said, "Who asked you for anything, Dad?"
Yeah.
It's the kind of antagonism that only a father and son can know. And it's tragic because in the end, he goes, for other reasons, he goes over the edge and shoots somebody, and and he goes to prison for murder, and that's what he does. And sort of he accepts his lot in life as, okay, I killed a guy, and this is my punishment.
Well, I probably would have killed that particular Greek guy too, because hey, who needs the Greeks, especially in modern times? I mean, come on. Everything they gave to us early on, Greek history, art, architecture, great, wonderful contributions to human history. Nowadays, not so much.
I will tell you this. He almost reaches Aaron Paul level of annoying in season 2. Almost.
He does.
He's
really
redeemed.
does.
He is redeemed in the last couple of episodes as the gravity of all that's happened to him makes him a much more serious person. But it's kind of like, where I'm watching this last half of, this 5.2 season of Breaking Bad, and they're trying to make Aaron Paul a much more serious character and everything, and they're like, it just doesn't work for me. Sorry, doing the Christian Bale Batman voice, talking about Walter White being the devil and everything, isn't really doing it for me. I still don't take you seriously. Whereas Ziggy just looks at his dad and says, yeah, I've done what I've done. Whatever happens, happens. He's got a black eye, he looks like shit, and he looks at his father and goes, it's what I deserve.
Well, I mean, a guy like him in prison is just not going to work.
Huh?
A guy like him in prison is just not a good thing. I mean, he's slight, he's not very, he can't fight, he's not a strong personality. It's not, him in prison is just not a good thing. The first time you see him and he's, beat to crap from what everyone else has done to him because he's now the low guy on the totem pole in a pretty unforgiving societal structure as far as prison goes. But since we've talked about, Ziggy, we need to talk about his father, who is kind of the quintessential good person who makes bad decisions, in that he's a bigwig in a union, and the union's going belly up. The whole dockyard industry, shipbuilding, unloading ships, the whole heavy industry and manufacturing in America is kind of dying. It's being replaced by automation and pencil-pushing jobs. And to keep his union afloat, he begins doing illegal work for the Greeks. He helps them smuggle stuff in, he takes money for it, and just slowly things start spiraling out of control as they find a bunch of dead bodies.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. The agreement is he will allow the Greeks to push drugs and whatever else through the docks, as long as it's, not weapons of mass destruction or anything like that. I mean, as long as it's just drugs and other random paraphernalia, they're willing to do this so that he can save money, so that he can use that money to lobby the district council to do some renovations to the pier so that more jobs can be had for the union members. This is all about saving the union. But it's sort of he's willing to bend morally so long as he doesn't have to bend too far, and then he has to bend too far. And by that I mean they never tell him they're bringing prostitutes over in a can, and that is exactly what they do. And one of them is killed and thrown overboard. The rest are suffocated, and that's what gets season 2 off and rolling. And you see it, the anger in that. It was like, hey, it was one thing when it was heroin, but it's a whole other thing when you bring over dead girls. Now, what kind of game are you playing at here? And you realize with him that this is not about drugs. He's not attempting to be. This isn't Walter White here. He's not attempting to be a drug kingpin. He doesn't really care what. I mean, he'd rather not know. And he says that. He's like, I don't want to know what you're bringing over here. I don't. Just tell me which can it is and how much you're paying me. I have other things to do and bigger fish to fry. And he feels like he has to do this in order to for the greater good. He has to create a life for the culture around him, the culture that he's a part of, that's in his blood. The way that he has fed his family for the last 20 to 30 years. and that his brother has fed his family. So he's feeling like he's been forced into this position, but at no point was this ever about the illegal activity itself. It was always about the greater good. And then all of that is challenged and thrown into flux by virtue of a can of dead girls, which he is livid. His life is at risk. His whole lifestyle is at risk. You know, the Union is at risk because of that. And you know, that anger about it is what you see in him in the first couple of episodes.
And he just can't seem to dig himself out of that hole. He agrees to cooperate to try and help his son, and at the end of that, the Greeks find out that he might be snitching, so they kill him. And,
yes, had he not listened to Nick, and had he just had a lawyer show up, this would have been a completely different ending to season 2. It always irked me that the Greek got away. For some odd reason, I know it was realistic, but for some odd reason, it always bothered me that case wasn't more successful than it was, and that the Greek got away. But I guess that's The Wire for you.
Well, almost all of that Greek crew got away.
Yeah.
And then you had the Greek with his hat and his mustache, and you had Vondrus, and almost all of them got away. There was Gelkis that was killed by Ziggy, but pretty much everyone else, well, Aton and the other guy went to jail, but almost all of them just were able to get out of the country before the investigation came down.
Yep. As my friend once, when you see the final montage and you see drugs going one way and girls going the other, he looked at me when we were watching and he goes, so the lesson in all of this is nothing stops drugs and whores. I said, no, Chuck, nothing stops drugs and whores.
Well, it would seem. But one of the things that I like about this is that there are characters that change. You know, there is growth, there is change, and there's two that I kind of want to talk about kind of in tandem. One is Lester Freeman, who we're introduced to in the first season because he's assigned to the junk detail that is the investigative unit because he currently works in the pawn shop division after he aggravated some people higher up and was sent there as punishment for rocking the boat politically.
Yes, he is the ghost of Christmas future.
He is. Worked there for 13 years and 4 months, and he is not shy about reminding you about the 4 months.
No.
I think we should talk about him, and in the same, because another character who changes over the course of this series is the lieutenant who gets assigned this detail, Cedric Daniel, because he's a very ambitious person at the beginning. He wants to move up the chain of command. His wife has political ambitions. He wants to be a major or a commissioner. I mean, he wants to move up in the world. And by the end of the series, he has changed a fair amount in that he gives up his ambition because he is so sick of all of the
corruption,
of all the stuff that goes on with it, and he becomes a criminal defense attorney by the very end.
So I guess we'll start with Lester. As I said, he's the ghost of Christmas future. He is what McNulty will become if he does not, and ultimately what McNulty does become if McNulty does not change his ways. He is a cautionary tale, and he is redeemed. And brought out of his bleak future by virtue of the fact that they needed bodies, and he saw an opportunity to be useful and just sort of snowballed from there. But Lester Freeman is your guide through the minutia of detective. The Wire, as I said at the onset of this podcast, was a detailed look at what it is to work a complex case. There's lines in there like you follow the money and things like that. And so what Lester is sort of your guide for the audience to see what is it like to really work a case where you have to sit on houses and sit on people and do paperwork and follow money trails and where it's going to lead you. And it is the antithesis of what you see in any movie starring The Rock. Where everyone's running around pulling guns and things are blowing up and it looks. My God, who wouldn't want to be a cop if that's what it was like? Of course, if you ever talk to real police officers, they will tell you that it's much like The Wire. And I love characters like what are their Carver and Dominic Lombard's character.
Herc,
yes. Herc and Carver, who are your examples of police, who want it to be all about, thugging and bugging. They want to run out there in the streets and bust heads, and it's all about bullying people and making small, meaningless busts of small, meaningless drug dealers. Lester Freeman is the antithesis of that, and it's he's there to show you that their way is wrong. And that is what I guess what I was saying was that's what a lot of police officers will tell you is that it's more when done correctly, it's more like Lester Freeman's way. When done incorrectly, it's the Herc and Carver way. But one of the things that David Simon wanted to do with The Wire was show how listening in and wiretaps and how to get a wiretap and how all of these elements were important. And you just can't set up a microphone and start listening in on people's conversations. There's a whole legal rigmarole you have to go through. That's why I laugh when people are like, oh, we live in Big Brother times and the NSA is always listening in or whatever. Like my friend and I joke about this constantly. We always have to say, and to the NSA agent currently listening to this phone call, it really isn't like that. You have
not
to
at
go
the state
and show
level.
probable cause for why this is useful. And it has to be
Well,
time
yeah,
limited.
at the state level, you're right. When you get into the Patriot Act and what you can do on a federal level, it might be different. But by and large, yeah, I mean, you can't just stick a microphone in some, the character of Beatty in the second season, when observing just how much paperwork and whatnot they have to go through in order to get a wiretap, she looks at all of it because you have the U.S. attorney, you have the attorney there, and you have all of them filling out their paperwork, and they have to go through the judge who insists that they install a air conditioner on the third floor of his house before he'll sign. And just the amount of work that goes into getting that is just
But
insane.
it's there for your own good, Robert Winfree. It's there so that a police officer can't say, I don't like Robert Winfree's face, so I'm going to start listening to his podcast and see if he says anything I can arrest him for. It's there for your own protection. And yes, on the one side, it may cost you in terms of time. If you can't get it in a sufficient amount of time, you might lose the lead that you're trying to listen in on. Things like that. But you always want to err on the side of caution and freedom, and not get to the point where it's too easy to get a wiretap, and now nobody has any freedom anywhere.
Oh yeah, I agree. It was funny for Amy Ryan to sit there and go, man, I thought I knew about paperwork, because she's just a dock patrol. All she does is work on the docks. She drives around in a car and polices the docks and she only got into that because it was a pay bump and she got benefits from her old job. She's not big into police work or anything. Yeah, she's not really a cop.
Right. Port Authority people, they walk around the subways and the trains and the docks, and they make sure that Al-Qaeda isn't planting bombs or anything, or drugs are coming over. That's all she does. So she's asked to sort of make this monumental leap into being into a detective because of this particular case sort of sprawls across multiple agents, which is a funny scene in and of itself, as the agency sort of kick it around and say, well, it's your responsibility. Oh, it's yours,
Nobody wants the responsibility of 14 homicides that they're unlikely to close.
Right. But back to Lester. So through Lester, like I said, you're given a tour of what it's like to get a wiretap, what the importance of the wiretap is, and how it plays into the larger scheme of things. And while he's also a cautionary tale, and you don't want to upset the apple cart, or you will be thrown in a basement behind a door that says "Beware of the leopard." He's also in Lester. You see the story of what it's like to be a true detective, and what all you have to do to close a case the correct way. And so he's a fun character. He's the conscience, I think, of the group for the most part. I think he's I called him the ghost of Christmas Future. He's a lot of things. He's Jiminy Cricket. He's there to tell Herc and Carver you have to grow up and be real police at some point. He's there to tell Kima, look, you don't want to become McNulty with a vagina. That's bad all around. He's there to tell McNulty you are a terrible human being, and if you continue down the path you're going to lose everything, and you don't have much left. So fucking keep it together. And he plays off Bunk really well too. So Lester Freeman is a fun character to watch.
Yeah, and again, he is kind of stuck on Cedric Daniels because the whole first season, their unit is put together because McNulty goes to a judge who he knows and complains about Avon Barksdale and how no one's actually doing anything about it. The judge then being a judge, since judges can do pretty much whatever they want, goes to the police commissioner and says, what the heck, what's going on here? and I want something done about this. I want it done yesterday. And they go, okay, we'll put together a detail. We'll do something about it. They give Cedric Daniels this detail, and they assign him a bunch of humps. You have the drunk guy. You have the two drunks, including the one who gets punched out by a teenager and then claims retirement. You have the other one who goes into alcohol training. You have Presbeluski, who shot up his own police car. And you have Lester Freeman, who's been in the pawn shop unit writing index cards and filing them for 13 years and 4 months. And this is all very unhappy for Lieutenant Daniels at the time he's a lieutenant, because his goal is to move up the chain of command. He's on the short list for the next major spot that's about to come up, and his hope is, I can do this fast, I'll get a couple of drug busts, and the judge will go away. Irvin Burrell, who's the deputy commissioner at the time, will be happy with me, and I'll move up the ladder.
Real quick, I want to talk a little bit about...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, just real quick, because you had mentioned Police Commissioner Burrell. You know, Burrell, throughout almost every season of The Wire, is sort of seen as this dope. You know, he's seen as, you know, crooked, and, you know, he's at the feet of the mayor, and, you know, it's people like him making the big decisions. That's the reason why the police department's so fucked up. And he makes a lot of terrible decisions in the first season. It's like, we want to cut this investigation short, and we don't want to put too much into it. And, you know, he's made the scapegoat for everything that's wrong with the police department. And then it's not until, I think, the fourth or fifth season where he's being forced out of his position for one reason or another, so that they can promote Rawls and groom Cedric Daniels for that position, so that there can be some real change in the police force, as promised by new Mayor Carcetti. But he says something that sort of turns everything you've ever learned about this character on its head. By the way, he was one of the people I was referring to when I said I saw a bunch of black guys on screen. It was Commissioner Burrell, it was Daniels, and it might have been Freeman at the time. In any case.
And for the record, he's played by Faison. Frankie Faison, yes. I believe he's related to Donald Faison of fame of Scrubs, because he plays Turk on the television show. I think so. I mean, can't be a very common last name. I don't know. You talk, I'll look it up.
So he's talking to Daniels, or Rawls. No, he's talking to Rawls. And he says, you know, everyone thinks that I was so bad at this, and, you know, whatever. He's just like, keep in mind something. Every day you're going to get a new directive. Today it's, you know, one day it's stop the drug dealers. The next day it's clean up the streets. The day after that is run the whores out of the city. He's like, keep that in mind. Every day you're serving a new master with a new dictate. Makes it kind of hard to keep any long-term decisions going, long-term plan. I know, I'm like wrecking that bit of dialogue there, but the point that he's trying to make, and I think it's very poignant, is he was a victim of the culture in which he was working. And yes, he served the mayor, and he had various functions that unfortunately made it very, very hard for him to be an effective commissioner. You know, in the sense that, you know, people like McNulty, it was very easy for guys like McNulty and Lester Freeman to complain about the police department. They weren't the ones getting the dictate from up on high from people who were not in the police department. It's funny, we recently had a change in leadership where I work, and we have what they call health services administrators, and we've run through quite a few of them. And without getting into a lot of details, let me just say this: the HSAs commonly walk off the job when they realize that they have no real power. That, you know, they are basically told to carry out the will of the managers from corporate above them, and they cannot affect meaningful change in the sites that they work in. And then they realize, well, then why am I bothering to do this at all? If I can't run my site the way I feel like it needs to be run, then they can find any old monkey to do this, and I don't need to be here any longer. And that's sort of what he's saying. You know, it's entirely difficult to run an agency as sprawling as the Baltimore Police Department when you have people above you telling you how to do your job that don't really understand how the police department works. So he's a very tragic character. He's made to be the fool for much of The Wire, and it turns out that he's better than he's been portrayed up to this, and you don't know that until he's done with it to begin with.
Yeah, it almost makes you wish you'd seen more of the political pressures that had been put on him earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, you get slivers of it here and there, but I wanted to say this before. I think because The Wire moves kind of slow, and there is so much focus on the minutia of things, the minutia of political wrangling, the minutia of police work, the minutia of drug dealing, and people don't necessarily want to watch television dramas for the minutia of real life. They want drama, they want high drama, they want action. And The Wire sort of plays like a book, where books can tend to get into a lot of detail. You know, it's like my wife was telling me that the Twilight books, you know, the author just goes on forever at points about a lot of minute details that you don't see in the movies, because movies are not books.
Yeah.
So you get a little of that here and there with Burrell's character, but it isn't until that last speech he gives that you really see, oh, that's the story they were trying to tell with him. That's sort of the cautionary tale he's trying to tell Rawls. But that's ultimately what Cedric Daniels finds out very quickly. You know, yeah, he's very politically motivated. He's somebody who plays loyal, but also is trying to find an angle to get himself promoted up. And he teams up with Carcetti because together they're going to change Baltimore. They're going to change the police department and ultimately the world. And Carcetti is unable to fulfill his promises, and ultimately, because of the way things end in season 5, where they have to cover up a huge scandal, and he is forced to play along. He says, "That's it. I've had all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. There is no fixing that." You know, that's the tragedy of his character. Is here was a guy who really just wanted to be a good cop and fix things, and be in a position to do that. And when he comes to find out is no matter how much he might want it, no matter how he might try, there is no fixing this department. That's just not the way the world works. And he says, that's it, I'd rather do something else, which is what his wife told him to do in season 2.
Hey, look, if we all did what our wives told us to do, we'd all be better off. It's just kind of what that's supposed to be, I think.
Certainly my wife would agree with you.
But, yeah, he tries so hard when you first meet him, he's trying to climb the political ladder. Then he decides he just wants to be a good cop and make a difference. And he realizes he can't, and at that point, screw it, I'll go become a criminal defense attorney, which is what he does at the end of the show.
You know, it worked well for the Jew lawyer, as they say.
Yeah, the man with the briefcase to Omar's shotgun. Hey, look, all this is going on. I'll make money off of the drug culture in America. Why not? But we've talked a lot about the good guys, for want of a better phrase. Yeah, I think we need to talk. We've touched on Stringer Bell, but I've mentioned this before. Part of my problem with The Wire, and I don't fall into it's the greatest show ever on television. It's very, very good. I don't feel like debating the merits of one show over the other at the moment. That's a debate that never ends. But
Communist.
the first sequence where you see Idris Elba as Stringer Bell, he's sitting in a courtroom with a legal pad wearing a suit. And you look at Idris Elba knows how to wear a suit. You put everyone else from that show in a suit, and they look like, get me out of this. By contrast, Idris Elba's Stringer Bell looks more you never see him wearing, for want of a better phrase, hood clothing. He looks, the man knows how to rock a suit. I have a hard time believing that he comes from the projects of West Baltimore. But that's my only kind of gripe there.
It's a great Gatsby moment, and they actually talk about that. That's why I know it's a Gatsby moment. Where they have, what's his face?
Well, D'Angelo's in the prison, and they're discussing The Great Gatsby as a novel for the book group that he's a part of.
Right.
And he's talking about how everything you can try to change what you are, but everything that came before you really happened, and it's really a part of you. And unless you're prepared to deal with that and let that be a part of you, you're never actually going to change, which is kind of the story of Stringer, who never is able to kind of overcome the drug dealing connection and all of the illegal stuff that he did because he wants to be a legitimate businessman. That's what he wants to do with his life. He wants to own his own companies. You see him taking classes at the community college in macroeconomics. He keeps trying to better himself, but because he's unable or unwilling to change where he came from, he never actually gets anywhere, and that's what catches up to him in the.
Well, I was going to say what D'Angelo says when he's talking about The Great Gatsby. He's like, oh, Gatsby has all these books and he's never read any of them. He's fronting with all these books. That's kind of Stringer Bell. Stringer Bell is desperately trying to layer himself up with all these illusions so that he doesn't look like the hood that he really is. And it's actually a point of contention between him and Avon, because he's not Avon says maybe you were never thug enough for this life, and then he says, oh, thug enough to kill your nephew.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is he spends the majority of his time in The Wire trying to distance himself from where he's come from and who he is. And he'll tell you that that's not who he is. He's better than all of this. He had to make terrible choices with the resources that he had available. And Avon has to keep reminding him, no, you asshole, that's really who you are. That whole sequence with him after the state senator, Senator Sheed.
On a brief note, I could not take that man seriously as a senator just because I had seen the actor before once, and that was in the Spike Lee movie, The 25th Hour, starring Edward Norton, where he plays the detective who arrests him, and his entire dialogue is that really slow, kind of low, yeah, shit. And it's just like, wait a minute, how did that guy get elected to anything when all he does is talk like that?
I have two words for you.
Go for it.
Dennis Kucinich.
Yeah, that'll work.
If Dennis Kucinich can be elected to Congress, anybody can be elected to anything. Jeff Harris can be elected mayor.
It could hey, look, Jesse Ventura was governor of Minnesota. Arnold Schwarzenegger was a governor of California. Jeff Harris being a city councilman or a mayor is not that far out of the realm of possibility, people.
The mayor of D.C. smoked crack.
Oh.
Senator
just
Shit. And it sounded like he was I don't remember what his real name is now. It's really bothering me. But
Clay Davis.
Clay Davis, yeah. When Clay Davis basically snookers Stringer out of a whole bunch of money, and Avon has said, boy, he took you for a sucker. He saw you coming a mile away. And it's like, see, as much as you try to portray yourself as something that you're not, everybody knows what you really are.
Yeah, but, the term sociopath gets brought up a lot when we discuss these types of things, and just for the record, a sociopath by general definition is someone who has no conscience. They have no concept of right or wrong. They just act or react because that's what they feel like doing. I think we need to talk about Marlo Stanfield as far as someone who just individually as a character, as far as someone who just could not possibly care less what goes on around him as long as he gets the respect or whatever he feels he's due, because he is just a complete psychotic in a lot of ways. He just doesn't care about, and he surrounds himself with people who similarly do not care. They just exist to kill people for him and or in one case, beat the poor guy to death. Well, not poor guy, but beat someone to death with the butt of his pistol. As far as being a sociopath, you have that guy who just is, borderline completely psychotic. It's a small miracle he's even functioning.
Yeah, when Jeremy and I were doing the season by season, we talked about Marlo, and I remember saying that I've met people like Marlo before where they're just a flat affect. You just look into you look into their eyes and you feel like there's just nothing there. And with Marlo did a very good job of playing a vacant, soulless murderer. It's funny. I hear a lot of talk about this show Dexter, and I don't know anything about no Dexter. I never watched it, but I know what it's about. But I don't cotton to these charismatic killers. Okay, real killers that I've actually talked to are more like Marlo. They got all that's going on upstairs is this most minimal survival instinct. And no remorse, just totally remorseless in their decision-making. They are all about taking whatever it is they feel that they need, and there's no further thought about it. It says, these folks will take whatever it is that they deem necessary, and they won't think one thing about how that will affect the greater world around them. And that was Marlowe, made for a thoroughly uninteresting character. Avon, at least, there was talk about, well, how do when you're a drug dealer and you're a drug kingpin, how does that affect your family, and how does that affect you as a person, and what does that mean to the larger culture around you? And through Avon and Stringer, there were a lot of questions that could be asked, and they were interesting characters. There's nothing interesting about Marlowe or his gang. Yes, they were fun to watch at times, and they were responsible for some of the greatest lines in that series, because in B-More we aim to hit a nigga. You heard? Now listen, that's all well and good, but it was like they almost needed a vacant, soulless vampire murderer so that they could focus on some bigger issues, because if they had another character like Avon who was bigger than life, or Stringer who was bigger than life, they just couldn't have been enough focus on all the other things they were bringing up in The Wire. So he's almost just he's Boris Badenoff, essentially. Him and his whole crew.
But it's funny because everyone calls Sergei Boris. That was one of my favorite lines from season 2. One of the associates of the Greeks is Sergei, the Russian, and everybody the first time they meet him calls him Boris. And and it annoys him to no end. Every time it happens, like, no, my name is Sergei, or they call him Serge. I mean, why does everyone call me Boris? And because of Boris Badenoff, Rocky and Bullwinkle, the cartoon with the squirrel, and he just stares at them like, I wish to kill you now. And then when he refuses to talk to the police, them completely, I think it's Bunk and Freeman, completely independent of the knowledge that he hates that, they decide, we'll just call you Boris. And he's sitting there in the interrogation room, and you can just kind of see the steam start to rise from the top of his head.
Boris,
like,
why
really?
Boris? It's very fun. It's also very telling about how we are as Americans. We're just so, I like listening to Samer and Lambert talk sometimes, because Lambert will fully admit he has absolutely no clue what's going on in the world outside of the most venal of pop culture, and then there's Samer, who's a little bit more worldly just by virtue of the fact that he has traveled the world, and it was like, you have no clue your president's about to attack Syria? Really? You're that much in a bubble? It's hilarious to me. So, the whole, like, well, we'll just call you Boris, as if that's the only fucking Russian name you've ever heard of in your life.
Look, I think Lambert's world is only expanded by Taylor Swift tweets. He only cares about what Taylor Swift cares.
No comment.
I'm right.
I do not wish to engage in this any further.
I know. I'm with you. I tend not to enjoy poking at other people who write or that we kind of interact with, but the man has an unabashed love of Taylor Swift and her music, which is completely legitimate and a little bit scary.
And I have an unabashed love of heavyweights, for which I receive an unending amount of torture from you writers. So, back to Marlowe and his vacant stare of death.
Yeah, he just... It doesn't seem like he really engages with anyone, he has his mentor who owns a rim shop who he goes to for advice on occasion, and even that, which you have to assume is like the most stable human relationship he's ever had, and it's like he's not there. He's just, I'm ready. I'm going after it. And whatever the guy says to him is like, if it doesn't agree with what he wants to do, kind of goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't have a lot to say about Marlowe just because, one of the television reviewers said he absolutely ruins 4 and 5. I wouldn't go that far at all. I don't think he ruins. Like I said, I think they minimized the role of the villain because they only needed him to. He becomes a device. He becomes, a typical antagonist. He keeps the action moving, but that's all he's needed to do. With Avon, you needed to tell a story. You needed to use the Barksdale family as a vehicle to get inside the world of the drug dealer. By season 4, you know what the world of the drug dealers is. They've just spent the last 3 seasons dealing with it. At this point, they got to deal with other stuff, and so you don't need to know the inner workings of his gang or why they're doing what they're doing. You just need to know that they're putting bodies in row houses so that by season 5 they can figure out what they're going to do with all of that knowledge, and just move on with it. Marlowe was pretty much there to set up this idea of what is a serial killer in today's America. Is it drug dealers and in street gangs that murder without any remorse? And you ever look at the statistics on this stuff? when you look at the amount of street crime and murders done by guns among people who live in urban streets, it's a fairly substantial number. And is that, say, less important or more important than the Aurora, Colorado Joker killing, or the Newtown shooter where the developmentally disabled nut, walked in and shot up his mom's school? What are we really talking about? Yeah, the two that I just mentioned were the hot items because it was white kids blowing up white schools, but that happens far less than the amount of black people killing each other in the streets on an ongoing basis. And that is all you needed to know about Marlowe's character. So you don't need to flesh him out any more than that. The only other thing about Marlowe that I think was when he tries to clean up at the end, he's told retire or you're going to prison. And so he opts to retire. And
he retires. He gets like $10 million for selling off all of his stuff.
Yeah.
Gets an obscene amount of money. And he still can't stay off of the corner. He comes down in a suit and beats up a couple of drug dealers just because he, for some reason, needs the recognition or can't escape from that.
Yeah, exactly. He has to. He is compelled to be in the street even when it's against his best interest. Because unlike Stringer Bell, who wanted more and wanted out of that lifestyle, he has sort of adopted the mindset of this is all I am and this is all I'll ever be. In fact, this is all I ever want to be. He's kind of in the Vic Mackey level of hell, where you're stuck in this place that you don't want to be in. And all you ever wanted to be was this other thing, and they've taken it away from you. So you're the most successful person. I mean, what's his face? One guy's in prison next to Weebay, who was the second coolest character on The Wire for taking murders for sandwiches.
Potato salad and coleslaw.
That's right. Some potato salad and coleslaw. I'll go a few more.
Yep.
Fucking awesome.
That's the line.
Yeah. If I ever go to prison for murder, Robert Winfree, I intend to take more murders for, especially if I'm getting life anyway. I'm taking as many murders for as much chicken and salad and peanut butter and whatever else they're gonna give me. I'm gonna get as much food out of the deal as possible because I'm a fatty.
Well, if you're going to go to jail, you don't want jail food, so get as much of that as you can.
That's right. What else would you like me to admit? What else would you like me to admit to?
Well, since a lot of this does deal with the drug trade, how about our resident addict? We got to talk about Bubbles a little bit.
Oh, God, dude.
Yes.
When Jeremy and I did our Wire retrospective, I think somebody left a comment there, just like, how could you guys do 5 episodes of this and not once talk about Bubbles?
Well, then let's make up for it now. Come on, talk to me about Bubbles, the homeless street addict who is an informant and tries to get clean a couple of times. Finally does at the very end, but
yes, and then it's summarily replaced by Dookie, whose scene where he shoots up heroin in the horse bar made my wife fall completely to pieces, almost being Baker acted in the process. She was teaching a student at this time. It was like her first teaching gig, and she taught in a primarily black school, and she was teaching, I think it was 2nd or 3rd grade, and this kid reminded her of Dookie in every single way. And so when she saw Dookie sitting in the horse barn shooting up heroin for the first time, she fucking couldn't take it. She was definitely one of those people like, turn this off, I can't take it anymore. This is too much for me. And I find Dookie to be a much more interesting character than Bubbles.
Well, you get Dookie early on in his life, whereas Bubbles, he's on the street, and he serves as just, gets to inform on the police. He gets to inform to the police because his friend gets beaten up by some drug dealers beaten as bad as he did for no good reason, and he becomes offended by that. He tries to get clean later. Again, at the end, he finally does. He finally kind of reconciles with his sister and kind of gets his life straightened out, but he's, what is it that McNulty describes him as? The short guy who mumbles a lot when he he asks for McNulty over the phone from another officer. Says, I want to talk to Greggs or McNulty, and that was right after Greggs had been shot. And he said, I got somebody down here asking for him. Is he a short guy who mumbles a lot? Yeah, that's him. Yeah, that's Bubbles.
Actually, I think he refers to McNulty as McNutty.
Well, that's fairly accurate too. He does. It's McNutty.
Good old McNutty, Officer McNutty. All right, you're going to twist my arm. You're going to make me talk about Bubbles. What do you want me to say? Bubbles is an addict. Bubbles, I'm going to drive you nuts the way I drive Chris Seven nuts on the Casual Heroes. I'm going to talk about The Corner for a moment.
All right.
Now, The Corner is sort of the prequel, not a prequel to The Wire. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. It was a 6-episode miniseries about a family in the throes of heroin addiction. So you have a mom who is, what's-her-face from Candy something or other from News Radio. She was just on something else recently. Oh, she's on Treme now.
Keep going. I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, she's been in News Radio. She's on Treme now. She's the mom in The Corner. There's a dad, and then there's a teenage son, and it's narrated by the guy that was on Rock, who was also in Alien, the bald black guy who plays Alva something or other in Oz, and he's in Aliens 3. It's good. So bring somebody like me on to talk about movies and television who can't remember anyone's fucking name. In any case.
Okay, I think the girl is Candy Alexander, if I'm looking at the right page.
You are looking at the right person, yes. So the mom is Candy Alexander.
The drug addicted father is T.K. Carter. The drug dealer is Sean Nelson. And then you have a few others, Clark Peters, Glenn Plummer, a few of the names that I don't recognize.
There's a bunch of people that were in The Corner that ended up in Oz and in The Wire, and a lot of these people end up on like the Law and Order shows, a lot of whatever shot in the East Coast. It's always the same like group of actors. So it's about a family in the throes of heroin addiction in Baltimore, and it focuses on how people become addicted to drugs, how that affects your family, how that affects you internally, the struggle once you're in the throes of addiction, how hard it is to get yourself out of it, how people will regard you even when you try to make changes. There's a great line, actually, in one of the episodes of The Corner where the father, what did you say it was, C.K. Carter, C.K. Simmons, J.K. Simmons, J.K. Rowling?
T.K. Carter.
Who is it? Thank you. T.K. Carter, where he goes to see, like, Schindler's List. Like, he cleans himself up one day, and he spends an entire day in the city of Baltimore, like downtown Baltimore, and he goes to the movies, and he buys, like, vitamins, and he tries to lead, like, a normal life for just one day. And he goes and I think it's Schindler's List. And he's talking about, like, the inhuman horror that befalls the Jews in World War II. And and then he goes back to the drug den. He goes back to the shooting gallery, the drug house, as it's called. And he's telling the other addicts that are all sitting around shooting dope about his experience in the day. And, they're like, what a dope fiend need to go to the movies for? And all that other stuff. And he starts to tell them about, man's inhumanity, the man, and maybe they need to clean up their acts and, they're blessed with life. Maybe they should do something with it. And one of it, I think it's Reggie Cathy or the girl that's in the group, who turns to him and says, motherfucker, just shoot dope and shut up. That's all you need to know about Bubbles, folks. Bubbles entirely driven by how he's going to get his next high until his entire life, what's left of it, and there isn't much, completely falls apart. He devotes himself to this teenager who he accidentally murders when he creates a poisonous hot shot.
Well, that's the second teenager that he takes under his wing. The first one is that white kid, Johnny, only white guy in West Baltimore, apparently, who lives on the streets. Winds up, I forget what happens to him. He winds up in jail, I think. And Bubbles winds up taking this other teenager under his wing who snorts up on the hot shot that he had devised so that he could kill this drug dealer who was causing them problems. Because he kills his friend, he then turns himself in and tries to commit suicide, which doesn't work. They get him detoxed, they get him clean, and he has kind of a happy story at the end because he winds up reconciling with his estranged sister and kind of is able to get out from under the thumb of addiction. But
sorry,
I interrupted you there.
No, it's fine. So Bubbles is your narrator through what it's like to be an addict. And you know what it's like to be an addict, Robert Winfree? It's like this. It's all you ever care about is drugs. That's it. That's your life. Whatever you need to do, no matter who you need to hurt, no matter how you need to get it, it's all about getting high. Because heroin.
I was actually a little surprised that Bubbles and Johnny decided to buy pants after they had their pants taken rather than just buy drugs.
well, it's cold in Baltimore. Let's face facts here. Have pants, will shoot up. Now listen. Yeah, Bubbles only starts to get interesting when he takes the second kid into his house, and he kind of becomes, and he says, like, in order to, he's trying to teach the kid how to, hustle and sell stuff from the cart so that they can make more money to buy drugs with, and then the kid accidentally kills himself, and Bubbles is now racked with guilt, and that's what finally forces him to get clean and stay clean, is his guilt. And the whole fifth season is, is for him, his story is about the intrinsic value of guilt. It takes me back to Star Trek V, not the Undiscovered Country, that's Star Trek VI, The Final Frontier, where Cybok says, I couldn't help but notice your pain, share it with me. And Captain Kirk says, I don't want to share my pain with you, I need my pain. And he's right,
makes me human.
You need your pain. That's right, it makes me human. And Bubbles, his thing is, he needs his guilt. It's his guilt that is keeping him on, the straight and narrow, and he doesn't want to, and again, he also feels the need to punish himself for the accidental death of this kid. Rob, I just don't find Bubbles that interesting. And maybe it's because I've been dealing with addicts for the last 10 plus years. God, how long have I been doing?
Don't start thinking about it. You'll get depressed.
And it's not getting any better, and they don't get better as people. And and look, God bless you if you are an addict and you've pulled yourself out of it and you've gone on to lead a productive life. God bless you. I'm happy for you. And I'm glad there are services out there so that you can, for you to access, so that you can do that. But please don't make me talk 1 minute longer about the depth and breadth of these characters. I just don't give a fuck. I'm more interested in the rest of the characters that didn't spend the majority of their life injecting poison into their veins.
Fair enough. I mean, you work with addicts all the time. I mean, I have to imagine that's just, I mean, when you see one on television, it's like, my mom's, I go to the movies or I watch television to be entertained, not necessarily to be reminded of my daily life. And I imagine in your case there's a fair amount of guys like Bubbles in your daily life, and you just don't need to see any more of that outside of that.
Do you know how many toothless street urchins and Morlocks I've had to deal with in my life?
I don't want to.
I swear, it is not uncommon for me to deal with people with their face tattooed. Remember when tattooing your face was, wow, Mike Tyson tattooed his face. Oh, he's crazy. He's out there. Everyone I talk to every single day of my life has their face tattooed.
Oh, yeah, especially if you're in prison at this point. It's just like, oh, he's got his face tattooed. Yeah, that's about par for the course.
Yeah, I don't even notice it anymore. I mean, it's like face paint in pro wrestlers. It's as common as the day is long. And so I know everyone loves Bubbles. Everyone loves Bubbles like everyone loves, O'Reilly. Who cares about an addict? Robert Winfree, who cares about the addict? Let's talk about the people who are struggling with trying to change the police department. Let's talk about the people who are struggling with their identity as a person versus their obligation to their drug lord family. They're much more interesting people. This fucking addict walked the streets of Baltimore and shot himself up for years on end, and then finally pulled himself out of it when he accidentally killed a kid. So what? I ask.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we're in the last 5 minutes or so, is there anybody that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Kima and Carver both change. You brought that up before, and let me just talk about Carver.
Oh, Carver, fine.
Okay.
Carver.
I want to talk about.
Go with Carver.
Because, like I said, he starts as sort of him and Herc are cut from the same cloth. They're both sort of, brickheads in season 1 and season 2. They're all about thugging and bugging, as I said before, just throwing guys on the ground and, just sort of being worthless as cops. And there comes a point in season 3 where Carver sort of ascends to a position of leadership. He's the staff sergeant, and he's doing the same thing, and he is effectively useless on his job, and he's called out for it by Major Bunny Colvin, who says, when I ask my sergeant in charge of the narcotics unit about people in the street dealing in narcotics, I expect answers, not a shrugging of shoulders. Stop being. At which point, Carver starts to understand that it's more about just throwing bodies on the ground. it's a shift in change for him, and then and you know how he's rewarded for this shift in change, for this shift in ideals. In season 4, he'll completely ruin one child's life. My God, one of the television reviewers was talking about the scene where Randy is yelling into the hallway, "You're going to be there for me, Carver? You're going to look out for me?" And this is after they've burned down his house. And Carver's just walking out, looking like he's going to tear his own heart out. It's good stuff there. But yeah, Carver learns over the course of 5 seasons, the importance of the importance of knowing your community, being a part of the community, and how that can help you in being the protector of that community, which is what cops are supposed to be. They're not soldiers. They're supposed to protect the community. They're supposed to work with the community in protecting itself, not being bullied. And he learns that lesson over 5 seasons, and by the 5th season, he is, despite the stuff with Randy, he is rewarded with yet another promotion that he's earned, that he hasn't just gotten through politicking and such.
It is political machination.
The only thing I'm going to say about Kima,
Sergeant the first time.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to say about Kima is that she starts to go down the McNulty path, and she realizes that's not. I said this earlier. She realizes that's not who she wants to be. She doesn't want to be McNulty, and so she reconnects with the son that she didn't want in the first place. She reconnects with him, and she becomes an honorable detective to the point where she finds out that Lester and McNulty have done something dishonorable, and she turns them in because she doesn't want to be the cop that justifies their actions with the greater good. You have to. Every man must have a code. That's the motto of The Wire, and hers is to do things by the book. And she, so it's about choices, isn't it, Robert Winfree? It's all about choices. And she makes the choice midway through the series that she isn't going to become a complete piece of shit like the people around her.
Well, that's a good choice to make.
Yes. Well, considering we're talking about series where people make choices to become complete pieces of shit, she stands out.
It's true. Her deciding not to become McNulty was a good moment, especially when you see her going down that path. It's like, no, here's this guy who nobody in their right mind wants to be like. He doesn't want to be himself most of the time. And you're turning into him, and thank God for Lester Freeman saying, look at here's McNulty passed out drunk in a corner. This is what you're going to be if you keep going the way you're going.
Yes. If there was ever a Ghost of Christmas Future moment, it was that one.
All right. We ended just about on time. All right. So, anything you want to plug for this coming week?
This Tuesday starts our 2-part retrospective of the First Blood / Rambo series on the Long Road to Ruin. Week after that, I believe we are... what are we... on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we are. It's Robert's pick, and we will be reviewing the new Civil War album that has nothing to do with Marvel Comics, I promise you. Of course, every Sunday is the 401 Ground & Pound radio show, and this Saturday night, the September 7th, I will be doing coverage duty as we are going to be covering Bellator with
without Joe Warren.
No Joe Warren. It's going to be headlined for the middleweight title.
Hour-long Joe Warren Unrivaled special that aired on Spike TV. Which I don't like Joe Warren as a person. I did? Or can you still hear me? You can't hear
headlined
me.
by Alexander Shlemenko and Brett Cooper. It also is the beginning of the Season 9 middleweight tournament. And we got a Pitbull sighting. Hot damn, Patricky Pitbull, 155-pounder versus Derek Anderson. So I'll be doing coverage for that first on Spike.com and then on Spike TV proper, starting at 6 o'clock. So go ahead and come on 401, check that out. You can also look forward to Casual Heroes bringing their wrestling podcast to the Radulich Broadcasting Network very, very soon.
Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, I got dropped again, I guess. Which happens.
That's all I got, sir.
All right.
So, all right, how many more weeks do we have left before Breaking Bad?
I don't know. I want to say 2 or 3. Give me a sec, I'll look it up. Alrighty. But yeah, I found it funny that Spike TV went through all the effort to do that hour-long promo for Joe Warren with his new camp and Greg Jackson and everybody else, and then he got knocked out in training, I've heard through the grapevine, and couldn't compete because he couldn't pass the concussion test. So all that promotional effort wasted. We have 4 more weeks before the end of Breaking Bad.
Well, it's the 29th. Sunday the 29th is the last episode of Breaking Bad, and I know this because that's the night we're going to be doing our post-season series finale Google chat discussion. So people should look out for that as well. But I'm looking at the calendar. If you do these every Friday night until then, you have 3 shows left.
That sounds about right.
So how are you doing this? You got 3 shows. Which ones are you going to do?
Well, I want to do The Shield. I don't know if I'll have you back on, or there was someone else from the website, a new guy who said he wanted to be on for that one, and I'm all about reaching out. So we could do that one. Then I think I want to do Dexter, so I'll have Sam Riccati back for that because he's a huge Dexter fan. And for the last one, I'll probably just fold in anyone that I've kind of forgot about. So anybody listening to this, if you have a character, a television show, anything like that you feel merits some type of discussion, I'm on Twitter.
Are you only I was going to ask, are you only doing shows that have ended?
No, I can do ongoing shows.
Well, I mean, you said I heard The Shield and I heard Dexter, which I'm assuming you're going to get Sam Riccati on for Dexter or Sean Comer, one of those two.
Yeah.
You said there's other people interested in doing The Shield, but if no one's interested in doing The Shield, pick me. But, you've got Sons of Anarchy out there. You've got Boardwalk Empire. I don't really think Treme fits into this, though it's another David Simon show. Weeds, Orange is the New Black. You've got a couple out there. I'll be curious to see which one you come up with.
Yeah, I think for the last one, I'll either do kind of a compilation of stuff that I didn't have time to give a full show to, so we'll do little bits of like Sons of Anarchy, Boardwalk Empire. There's another one that you didn't mention that I was thinking of, but Orange is the New Black warrants some consideration. If for no other reason, I get to trash Jason Biggs for a couple of minutes, which is always good value as far as I'm concerned.
I loved Orange is the New Black. I thought it was great.
I did. I know. I get to trash Jason Biggs, which I like doing.
Okay.
He played the fiancé, just one of the more unlikable characters as far as that whole that first season went.
I have a friend of mine who hates Jason Biggs and everything he stands for, and we actually had a long discussion about that. How about Sex and the City?
I've never seen it.
Okay, I'm just being funny, throwing that out there as a red herring.
There's that. Prison Break might warrant some discussion.
How about 24?
24 absolutely does. There's a lot of interesting guys. I mean, so he said the last episode I might just, I'll make a list. I'll take inclusions from anyone listening or anyone who wants to be on the show.
Here's what I think you should do. And by the way, you're cutting out again. If I may be so bold, I think you should do one episode dedicated to the Shield with a guest. I think you should do Dexter with Sam Riccati or Sean Comer, whoever's available. I think you should do 20. I think on your last show before Breaking Bad, I think you should do 24 solo, like you did Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I could do that. I was a pretty big fan of 24.
I totally think you should end this series of Good Men Gone Bad with 24 and have it be if no one's interested in doing 24 with you, just have that be the Robert Winfree hour.
Yeah, I could do that. I debated doing Game of Thrones just because, a lot of people are into it, but my issue with that was I read the books a while ago. So when I was doing research for this series, I was looking up other lists and people and, who everyone else thought was, great TV villains and everything, and Joffrey Baratheon kept coming up, and I'm like, okay, but by the time you're all realizing he's a disgusting, horrible human being and you want him dead, I already know that, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the books, I already know that Tyrion Lannister kills him. So I'm already past that. So I have a hard time with that. But yeah, I'll do 24 solo if I have to, just because there's so much.
Now, are you going to do a show dedicated to Breaking Bad on October 4th?
I believe so, or thereabouts. That week, or at least that week at some point. So just because I'm a big fan of that one, so I'll talk about all the assorted characters that come through there and see how the series ends up. I mean, it might end horribly, kind of like The Sopranos, and I decide, no, I don't feel like doing a whole episode after we do the Hangout, after we do the Google Hangout thing. But if it ends in an interesting manner, I don't mean interesting as in, wait, what happened? Then, yeah, I'll do a show the same week that it ends.
I will not be available for that. I will be at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party.
All right.
just needed to tell you that. But
no
thanks
worries.
for having me, Robert. I do so enjoy coming on your show and just expounding for hours on my favorite things.
Hey, you're welcome anytime. And once I get done with all of these television ones, I can probably get back to movies or books. I liked having this planned out for the next couple of weeks, so now I just got to look a little bit beyond that and say, should I devote an episode to Darth Vader or not? We can get the many faces of Vader.
If you want to bring on a groveling apologist for the prequel trilogies, you should have me back for that.
You don't have to apologize for what's good about them. There are good things about the prequel. Not many, but they are there.
Right, well, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, so if you're lacking for other Star Wars nerds that want to come on and talk Darth Vader, here I am. Pick me, pick me.
For as much crap as Phantom Menace gets, that is one of only 4 movies I have ever paid to see in theaters more than once.
Yeah, I saw it twice opening day. And I saw it in 3D with my wife.
I saw that movie, I think, 4 or 5 times during its original theatrical run in theaters, and yeah, I paid to go see it in 3D when it was re-released in 3D. So, I can acknowledge the faults that movie has all day long. I have never not enjoyed watching it. I mean, despite the obnoxious kid and the waste of the talent that comes from Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, and Natalie Portman, I can just still enjoy the movie. I can sit back and enjoy it. And it's one of the few that I have paid to see movies in theaters more than twice. I can count it on one hand how many times I've paid to see a movie in theaters more than twice. More than once, you're getting into, maybe a dozen. More than twice, there's, off the top of my head, I think 3, because I paid to see that more than once, the first Lord of the Rings, and The Mask of Zorro, when it came out. And as far as theatrical releases go, those are it. Those are the ones that I have invested a fair amount of money into. Everything else, it's usually one and done, or I get someone else to pay for me to see it the second time.
3 teens try to rob grandma with toy gun.
Welcome to our world. It's a crazy
I think that's a great place. I think that and the girl of the video of the girl twerking, falling through a glass table and setting herself on fire is the greatest thing in the history of the internet.
I could not stop laughing at that. I had to share it with my family. I did. If only that could have been Miley Cyrus instead. But hey, my wishing immolation on.
I'm in my office in the jail and I can't breathe. I'm laughing so hard.
Yeah, I wish immolation on a lot of people, and I'm adding to that list anyone who twerks. All right, so let me get my brief plugs out of the way. We did this on Friday. Locked in the Guillotine is up. I have a double review of UFC 164, The Fall of Black Jesus, and UFC Fight Night 28. Glover Teixeira beats another sub-top 10 opponent, although apparently that's enough to get a title shot nowadays. But hey, John Jones has just beaten everybody else so badly, we have to reach for talent. I mean, Alexander Gustafsson has done nothing to make anyone believe he has a chance of beating John Jones, and the entire promotion is based on, here's a guy who is as tall and is physically similar. Never mind that he got choked out by Phil Davis.
All right, we're going to talk about this more on Sunday. Robert, thanks for having me on. I'm going to drop off.
All right, yeah. Thank you for being here, Mark. Like I said before, you're welcome anytime. And that will do it for this episode. Thanks for sticking with us. I'll be back next week doing either The Shield or Dexter. If you want an update, follow me on Twitter at at Winfree MMA. I have a weekly column on 411 Mania. You can find me on any of those places if you have suggestions to make or anything along those lines. I'll just say, remember that the bad guys make the bright spots that much brighter, because if there weren't shadows, we wouldn't know what light was. So good night, everybody.
So say good night to the bad guys.